hey, are you feeling stressed? Quit your job and go meditate by the river for 6 hours a day. It's like, well, that's not feasible for me. I've got kids, I've got responsibilities.
Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast, where we explore the ins and outs of the seven figure journey. Uh, my name is David Gilliland. I'm one of your hosts here, and we have the privilege of having Ant Caligaris with us with Fringe. Ant, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
You have got a fun business. You're in this space of, from what you explained to me, was we're taking how people lived healthy back when and cared, essential parts of life before the modern era, and how do we make that alive for us now? For instance, how do we get enough of the right light? How do we ensure our water is healing and helpful? How do we take time to connect with nature when really few of us have that around us all the time? And so I love the approach. I love what you're doing. But what got you into it in the first place?
That's a good question. My co-founder and I, so her name is Allison Evans. Her background is as a chiropractor in the medical space. And so she's always had a large passion for alternative medicine, plant medicine, breath work. My background is in economics, specifically more in business economics. And my passion is building really good, high functioning organizations. And so we worked together at our previous company that was sold at the end of 2018. And after a couple of years of working through the acquisition process, it became clear to both of us that we were ready for something else. And so, in the middle of the pandemic, June 2021, we left our jobs and started Fringe. And she's like, hey, I want to go do this concept. I want to make this concept a reality. And I was like, great, I want to make that a reality from my side of the business. And so I've always had a passion for that sort of stuff. My first job was in the running industry. So being in health and wellness and fitness has really been impactful to me on a personal level. And for her to have that passion and more importantly, the knowledge around what is plant medicine, what is light therapy, how would we message that to our community and organization? It was a really good combination. So we started out with plant medicine with the CBD process, our CBD products, and then moved into light. And we're on our way to a bunch of different spaces. And like you said, supplements and water supplementation and all sorts of stuff. So it kind of was a natural evolution, I think, for both of us coming from like fitness, athletics, more into a general wellness with then a passion for what's the best way to be impactful to general wellness. Well, historically, we have a ton of information about what has worked for us in the past. And it's pretty evident, I think, to most that we're not there anymore. There's a ton of benefit to where we are in our modern lives, but there's also some challenges. Like you mentioned, like we don't get enough light. We don't drink enough water. The water we do drink doesn't have in it what it used to have or has in it what it didn't used to have. How can we bring those things with today's science and understanding into modern life in a way that isn't like, hey, are you feeling stressed? Quit your job and go meditate by the river for 6 hours a day. It's like, well, that's not feasible for me. I've got kids, I've got responsibilities. How can I get some of that benefit, push it into what I'm doing today in a really impactful, intentional, transparent way? And so it kind of evolved very quickly from general wellness concept into, okay, how do we build this for people to actually have access to it right now?
Yeah, that's very cool. I love how you came together with a partner early on, and the two of you have complementary, not identical, but complementary skill sets in the space, right? It's just a real key, I think, along the journey is to find who is my yang, right? Uh, who's the other that can help me, and together we can bring, we have a common passion, but very different skill sets, and that's just a great formula for success. You know, I'd love to transition a little in here and say, so, I mean, you guys have grown rapidly. You've done a good job with it. You've shifted away a little bit from your original product and moved into the main line and like, let's go, let's build this, let's do this well. And some of these products that you're talking about, what what has helped you the most, or maybe the top two or three things since you achieved that $1 million mark and now you're just about tripled that, what's helped you in that growth in the last year?
Yeah, we actually talk about that not infrequently internally. And I think the consensus has been that the answer to that question is probably frustrating for an aspiring entrepreneur insofar as it's not like one or two specific things and, oh, here's the solution. I'll tell you the thing that's helped us the most has been tenacity, agility, and endurance. We've been able to work really hard, change to inputs very quickly, and do both of those things over a really long period of time. And it's like, okay, great. Like, thanks for the pep talk. That doesn't mean anything to me, right? Like, those are characteristics of a person, but it's not untrue. Like we've been able to get up off the floor a bunch of times. We used to talk about we just took haymaker to the face over and over and over again for 18 months. And the only way we moved forward is by getting up. There were challenges that presented themselves that we didn't anticipate. And I think that's the crux of that. It's not necessarily you start a business, you know what the challenges are going to be, you know how you're going to adapt to those challenges. You start a business, you think you know what they're going to be, they're not that, you got to adapt. So for us, very quickly, it became, well, we started as a CBD product. All of a sudden, our ability to scale our messaging was significantly dampened by things we didn't anticipate. We could not scale via social platforms. There were a ton of banks that weren't available to us. Our credit card processors would only do certain things and wouldn't allow us to say certain things. So all of a sudden, it was like, well, hold on, we didn't think we weren't going to be able to talk about the product that we make. That's not what we thought was going to happen. What we thought was going to happen is like we might have some challenge in growing it at scale, but we didn't think we'd be muzzled from the jump. I mean, very immediately, our credit card processor stopped depositing our revenue in our bank account. Like we just were not making money. You don't start a business thinking that's what's going to happen and this is how I'm going to adapt to it. So it really did come down to like, oh crap, okay, didn't think that was going to happen. It happened. What are we going to do about it? And how do we continue to move forward? So I don't want to say it's just a matter of time because that's also super frustrating to hear, but it really is. Can you go into this thing eyes wide open? Can you adapt to whatever presents itself that day, week, month, quarter? And can you continue to move forward? And that was really early days. Like when I was talking to people we had people coming into Fringe who just straight quit their jobs. And it's like, hey, we're not paying anybody right now. Like, I don't think this is a good personal decision for you, but if I can't talk you out of it, we'd love to have you. And so those people coming through, it was just all of a sudden, we have this group of people, we've got to grow, we've got to adapt, we've got to move forward. Uh, it was really challenging. It was really challenging, but I think it was those things that just being able to adapt and understand early days that we were open to adaptation. Those people coming in, like, this is what we think we're going to be. This is who we think we're going to be as a company. But if it's not that, we're okay with that. We're going to adjust. Our customer and community will tell us what they want us to be. We have a concept and a general direction. Let's be open to that. If one thing doesn't work this first year, we're not just giving up and walking away. So everyone needs to understand that from the very beginning that like we were never built to just be a CBD company. That was never the whole concept here. But we very much pivoted away from that essentially out of necessity because we weren't growing the way we needed to grow. And that's when we came out with the red light product in January of 2023. And then everything changed. So it was just not giving up, which is such a cliched, boring answer. I know, but it's true. It really is true.
Well, I love it. Let's take the 3 points, and then I'm going to add one that you alluded to. So you hit the point of tenacity, agility, and then you didn't say this last. You kept talking about it, but it's like, is it patience? Is it endurance? Is it long lasting? Like
Yeah.
keep it up, right? It's stick to itness in one sense, not to the original idea of how we're going to win in our market, but instead to this, and this is the fourth one that you were alluding to, this like we didn't set out to be a CBD company. We thought that was a route. We set out to be health wellness. Let's tap back into what we used to have and what we can become, kind of thing. Like we wanted a holistic way to have health for people, and felt like that would be a great business to be in together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. The word is endurance. It's the ability to adapt and continue over a really long period of time. Because anyone can adapt and continue for 90 days, 6 months, whatever. But it's the endurance of doing that for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Because you keep thinking, like, it's going to be a year, it's going to be 18 months, and then I'll be out of the woods here. And you just don't know that. And so, like, you kind of have to have that hope that, like, around every corner is when it is going
Yeah,
to change. And, like, I don't, our team's probably tired of me saying these words, but I always think we're right on the doorstep of something big. Like, there's always something right there that, like, man, wouldn't it suck to give up right now? And
yeah,
then look back and be like, we were right there. And I don't, there's graphic I saw, I think it was in elementary school. It's a super cheesy graphic, but there's two miners with pickaxes, and they're through the mountain, right? And there's
yep,
a
yep.
diamond, and then one guy walks away and the other person does not. And it's like, man, that haunts me. The fact that you could be right there, turn around and walk away, I would not be able to live with that. It would haunt me every day.
Yeah, I just saw a graphic that did another play on this, where they had the two mining and digging, and the one finds a diamond, holds it up, and the other one's like, oh. They leave with their diamond, and this one jumps to the other person's hole and starts digging. And then the graphic shows this bigger diamond on theirs. Had they just kept going, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
keep going. And but it's such, like, I love that you paired this tenacity of sticking to it and working through, and resilience, and we're going to endure through this thing with agility, because I think we get stuck sometimes on our product and our idea instead of on our market and their needs,
Yep.
right? And the adjusting there, the shifting, pivoting. Uh, when I say I think we, I mean I think me. I think I get stuck sometimes, right? Like that happens. And you're like, no, I'm going to endure. I'm going to push through. When really the right thing was to push through in a new way,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It was a push through. It was to get past this barrier in my own brain in what I'm certain the customer value proposition is, instead of discovering still. So great
Absolutely.
insights.
Yeah.
How do you build that into your culture and into your process, instead of just hoping you do it right?
Yeah. Again, something that I do it verbally ad nauseum consistently. It's almost the same concept to instilling it in the culture to the concept itself. Just consistent endurance, agility, adapting the messaging, changing it to the
Yeah.
existing season. It's like this is something we talk about, right? We talk about what this needs to look like, what our approach needs to be. Okay, we're in this stage of the business. What does that mean? What are our current challenges? Like, we need to adapt, we need to learn. And there's just a group of people. It's some of this stuff's like inherent, right? So I'm a big believer in, if you have the right people, you don't have to do too much post onboarding work in that regard. It's just in them. We got a lot of people on this team who fight. They are fighters. Sometimes to our detriment, like, we're just gonna keep going. To your point, sometimes you are at a stage where you're like, I do need to adapt here because I've been pushing on this really hard for a long time and it might not be actually beneficial. So that's the challenge, right? Is like, between that and being the person who walks away from the diamond you were right on the cusp of. So it's like you kind of have to go past where the diamond should be. And if you still haven't gotten there, it's not there. Like, there
Yeah.
might, or it's at least not what you thought it was going to be. And it is time to adapt. But as far as hardwiring that into our culture, it starts with who we have. And, like, we've had people come on board where the first thing is like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't care what you're going to do. I know who you are and I know what you're going to do by way of adapting to what happens at this business. I know that you've got a ton of resourcefulness. I know that you work really hard. I don't care what you do. I just need that person. That person will go and do anything here. So I don't have to every day or every week remind that person who they are. That's who they are. The challenge is, as we scale, how do we protect that culturally? And I think at some stage here, and I believe we've passed it, but there's a cultural tipping point where like we're pretty baked. I don't know how many people have to be in an organization for that culture to be self-evident, but I think we're either there or very close. So that if somebody comes into the Fringe organization now, it's very apparent to them how we operate and like what the expectations are. And if it's not apparent, they either self-select out, or honestly, like in the future, we haven't had to do this before, but in the future, like we will take action to make sure that that's protected because it is our superpower. We can't start to dilute that just because we want 15, 20, 30 people on the team. Like that's not what we're here to do. So I think we've got the people. I think the messaging has been repeated to the point of like, please stop saying that. And I don't think at this point, like we're going to have to do much more because it's like the community, our organization, our group kind of self polices in a certain sense.
That's perfect. Um, there's that second nugget. So, I mean, we got the 3 points before, right? We've got tenacity, we've got agility, and we have an endurance thing, the long term on that tenacity, right? So, a fighter who keeps fighting, in line with the vision of what you were always hoping to achieve. Maybe not the product, sometimes not even the customer segment. Like a total shift if you need to go and serve that why that you wanted. Then the second little nugget here was, how do we make that real in our company and bake it in? Uh, don't bring in someone who isn't the right someone in the first place. They need to have those things you just mentioned in them, evidence of it in the past. You see it in them, it's always been there. Let's bring those people in. And then, and the CEO title, I like to call the chief evangelist officer.
Hmm.
It's like, or that politician's got the same stump speech over and over. Like, really? Do you have to say it again? I've heard it over and over again. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And even though your team's rolling their eyes, like, oh, Ant's going at it again, it is so important.
Yeah.
And really, they're glad to hear it again. It gives them this foundation of, I know where we're building from. I know who we are. I know where we're headed. Ant hasn't changed his tune. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
The worst thing you can do is give whiplash feedback, right? Or
Yeah,
switch directions. I mean, the bigger the organization, the bigger the ship, so to speak, the harder it is to turn it. Like you can't just be like, "Oh, we're here." No, no, we're over here. This is completely different. I know I said that 90 days ago, but it's this now, or no, it's this now. Like it needs to be consistent. It needs to endure itself as we
yeah,
scale. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of keeping it
absolutely.
up. And then again, like the eye rolling, I overstate because we do have the right people. So the right people who have those things don't mind hearing about those things because
That's
they know they
right.
have it and it feels good. They're not just like, oh gosh, please shut up. If somebody is rolling their eyes like, oh, please shut up, maybe
They're
you're
probably the
actually
wrong
not
person.
the right person. So like
That's
there's all,
right.
it's not like an XY, there's XYZ here of like all these things that combine in a 3D sense versus just like, here are the three things. We need these two people. Those things are five variables. Here's how they combine. Okay, away we go. It's like, oh, they all connect to each other in very different ways for specific gravities. It's yeah, that's my
Yeah.
passion. I love that. I love cultural inertia. I love organizational momentum. How do these things work? What sort of clarity are we getting? What's not working? How are these variables interacting? Like that. That's the challenge I think that I like. At times it can be definitely frustrating, but again, if you got the right people, it's not that hard.
Yeah. And you're talking from a dispersed workforce
Mm-hmm.
that's not sitting in the same office together and have to stay that engaged and on it going, which many find really challenging. And so I love that you've seen it's actually more important to do the things you're talking about when you can't touch the people on the daily. Right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so, really powerful. Well, you've grown to this stage. And you've had some great success. Everyone would look at it and say, "Wow, you took a product company that you guys are out there cranking away, trying to figure it out, and you're essentially tripling it in 1 year's time. That's hard work.
Yeah.
That's fighting. That's fighting hard." Um, And achieving that kind of growth just throws you into new challenges. That's what this is. It's every day new challenge, fight to overcome, and you run into them faster and faster the faster you move. So, what's your latest one? Maybe we can be of help to help you spur and hit your 10 million in the next year or two.
Yeah, I think that the challenge with being, like you're saying, dispersed or distributed workforce across time zones and countries is exactly that. We're not like the communication and collaboration is challenging, and that's challenging just in and of itself. But as our business continues to grow, complexity grows, if not linearly, exponentially to that growth.
Exponentially.
And
Yes, it
so
does.
the challenges that we've had inherent to who we are and how we operate become magnified. And so it's that of like, how do we continue to be mindful of that? What sort of attentional approaches are there? We've benefited in our current technological era rather, from what happened in the work from home movement, if you would like to call it that. We have tools now that help, right? Like, everyone's a Zoom expert. Prior to 2020, Zoom was a
We
thing
were
for
not.
sure, but like conference calls or whatever, everyone's in the office. That's a like that tool, right? Slack is a big tool for us. We have a lot of digital collaboration spaces like Google Drive. But yeah, I mean, what I would be curious as far as like sourcing information, it's like, for people and companies who have been where we are, what are the insights? We're working through them, we're learning, but it would be wonderful to understand, oh, I had that. Like, this is kind of where we were when that happened. And this one or two or three things were actually surprisingly impactful. Like, that level of insight is always super helpful. But that's a challenge. Right now, complexity, putting strain on our ability to collaborate because we're all over the globe. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting challenge.
Yeah. Um, let me, are you okay if I, well, first of all, we're talking about how do I keep expanding? I've got people diverse, spread out all over, and communication coordination, it gets more heavy, onerous. Like, just to keep in touch in the various time zones all the way across, and have the movement and speed of decisions that you had before when you were smaller, it gets more and more challenging. And then each of them have to solve that for themselves too, it feels like.
Mhm.
So, where do we go from here? Okay, let me ask you a few questions, because at certain stages of business, new needs arise. What's your leadership team look like right now? How many people are leading other people today?
Leading other people, we've got, I think it's going to be weird to say this, but three or four. We're
Okay.
still a small team, right? So,
Yeah.
like, each functional space on this team has one, two, three people. Uh, we also have people who are working part time externally. So, I guess I would say four, which would be what you would probably expect: sales, marketing, myself, and my co founder. So, I oversee the business. My co founder is overseeing like our science, education, and product development team. So, yeah, I would say four would be my final answer.
Yeah. Um, with those four, how geographically dispersed are they compared to the rest of the team? Like, are they all sitting? And I don't know where you're located. I should have asked, but like, are they all sitting East Coast right now? Or
No. Nope. We've got one in California, one in Denver, and two here. So our marketing officer and myself are here. Sales is in California on the West Coast, and my co-founder's in Colorado, so Mountain Time. So we're just missing Central Time for leadership, and we'd be spread
and
out
you'd have the
fully.
U.S. covered. Is your
Yeah.
team? Do you have any team members outside of the U.S. in those four time zones?
We do. We have two in Canada, but they're on the Eastern Time. Sorry, so they're
Yep,
Eastern. Yeah. Yep.
they're the same.
Yep.
Okay, so I wouldn't worry about that piece. I just wanted to see. So you're only talking about time zone right now across four time zones. We're not playing
Yeah.
with the 24-hour cycle. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'll
Yeah.
just stick with these then. Um, and that's much more, that's a different level. But as you begin to grow, one of the collaborate coordinate piece, it goes back to what you first said, uh, is it built into their DNA? So finding people who that's built in matters first. And if you have them, great, I've got them. Messaging matters. And if the messaging's happening, why it's so important, great. But if it's not, there's something to look at.
Yeah,
So we see it become more and more important the more it gets away from us. So you're at a stage in business now where we need to have everyone else saying those things as frequently as you are. We need to have another, how do we intentionally build leaders on the regular and include people in leadership kinds of decisions? Whether or not they have a formal title, I don't care.
sure.
What I care is that they're leading, and and that they understand the importance of keeping that culture alive, so that your genius that you've had, Ant, all along in growing the business, what you brought, that there start to be more people with that genius,
Mm.
and that you can predictably build more of them. The reason is they then are leading more initiatives and more things with others, and they're
Yeah,
creating others, and you don't have to touch as much. They're managing coordination with each other. So those are things. First step. How's that going? Do you feel like your four and are there, and they are building future leaders intentionally with work they're doing today?
I think that's hard. I mean, essentially, what you're saying is pushing down into the organization, kind of those leadership values and management to help scale that out, and then hopefully it just keeps going and going. Right. The the challenge we have right now with that is like that's a mid to long term goal in a certain sense. Whereas the challenge we have is every day is like a universe unto itself. Every week for sure, and absolutely every month is like, what does this month look like? So I'd say the answer to your question of like, do I think that we're doing decently in pushing that down is kind of a sort of. It's just not something that we focus on because each day, week, and month, we're focused on growing like the external part of the business, scaling our
That's right.
messaging, all the task driven stuff, right? Like, what are we doing? Like, what does everyone's day look like today? Because that's what we're going to do. And then trying to not sneak in, but like squeak in moments where we can talk about these things. I have a one-on-one every Monday with each of our like leaders, and
Yeah.
that allows us to at least touch on it. Uh, but I think I mean, I say we, I think I could be more intentional about doing that. Just need to find the right time and space to do it for sure.
And yes, there's work of pushing down how you want them to think, how you want to do. Uh, but perhaps in the work of how we expand externally, how we get to this new market, how we do this next thing, what if instead of pushing down, we're calling it out and calling it up? For instance, you need a team member who's in Canada to do some work around a marketing piece. And that marketing piece, by the way, needs to really understand the new product innovation that's going on, that they're messaging, and the customer in there. And they need to understand some of the financials behind it and the metrics. And so then asking them to say, you're going to do some great product stuff. Let's make sure this hits on point, on budget, and and making promises we can keep on product. um, who should you be talking to? Who should you be collaborating with? In other words,
Yeah.
just in every moment, there's a messaging. Who
Hmm.
should we be talking to? How can we collaborate? And are there any barriers? How could we do this faster? Because they can identify where they're at. Yeah, it's hard to talk with them. They're always doing these things. I always feel like I need to wait. Like, oh, what could we do to fix that?
Hmm.
Because us fixing it now and getting each person thinking, I can be a part of removing barriers and speeding up the highway of information, either through technology or through process or through relationships.
Hmm.
Because sometimes it's about working together on teams where trust is higher, so information flows faster. But just inviting the people, yeah, you're going to go kill it in the market, expanding this. Who should be engaged? How can you communicate? Remember, they have a day job. You can't suck up all their time. How could you do this more succinct? Um, just
Yeah.
asking, just asking in the work now, that they see that there's relationships to build, there's tech to leverage, and there's processes or meeting rhythms or something else that can be tapped into. What could they do? What are the combination to remove barriers to keep the information highway flowing fast inside your business? Um,
Yeah.
it, that's what we're building in there, is an awareness of, here's the key for our growth. It's that this team has to learn to work faster together to keep up with where we're going in the market. Let everyone do it. So that's a
Yeah.
call up from below instead of a push down. It's, let me call you into solving the problem with me. Is that, let's talk about that. Just 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Is that touching or?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is, in exactly the way you said it. Like I say these things, but I don't necessarily ask those questions. So it's this hoping for the same output with, to your point, versus pushing down, pulling up with a question. So I always strive for operational autonomy, right? Like I want that to happen.
Yeah.
My job to date has very much been like a dot connector, because we're not good at what you're talking about. And we can come up with any number of reasons why we're not that good at that quite yet. And a lot of people are doing things that they're new to. We're new, things are changing,
Yeah.
whatever. But we don't do a great job of that, and potentially switching the approach to like, hey, I'm going to ask you in this function to think about the stakeholders to your actions. Like you're
Yeah.
going to do a thing. Who is that going to affect? And can you touch base with them? Because you have avenues: email, text message, phone call, Slack, Zoom, whatever you want. You can do it. I've essentially, I don't want to say this, it sounds a little draconian, but like I've told people that we need to do that, but I haven't necessarily asked them to bring it out of themselves.
Yeah.
And to be frank, like I have sat here sometimes confused at why we're not as autonomous as we could be. And maybe this is just, it's change in approach, and I'm evolving too. I haven't led as the CEO a completely dispersed and distributed workforce before. I've led very large organizations, but we had a ton of people in them, and they were all in the same building or two buildings, and it was much easier. So like I'm also evolving, right? And I'll I'll say this without trying to go down a rabbit hole too far, but as we've hit plateaus of growth and we've started to kind of like stagnate in certain seasons, I don't I know it's not down to me exclusively, because our team is incredible and does a great job. But to get out of those plateaus or to move on from those plateaus, you can almost map that against like a personal evolution on my end too, of something like that,
Yes.
where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm beating my head against the wall. I'm saying the things over and over again. They're not doing well. Evolve, dude. Like, what do you need to change? What needs to be different? And our most recent one has been clarity and expectation setting. But this is definitely one too, like bringing stuff out versus pushing stuff in.
Yeah.
It could really help. Yeah.
I love, I mean, your personal awareness. You guys are just going to do fantastic, by the way, because of ways you're approaching um, the personal awareness and humility of the leader to recognize, I am not the leader today that my team needs even 6 months from now, maybe even
Mhm.
3 months from now, maybe for tomorrow. That my team's growth is limited by my own growth, not because you're going to touch and do everything,
Right.
but
Yeah.
because you'll actually get in the way of their
Absolutely.
ability. Right? And so we have to keep growing so we don't become the thing they're bumping into and struggling with. And you your approach is fantastic. Your approach at learning and becoming is going to be a key to growth for this group, and then helping them learn that that's the same for them
Hmm.
and everyone around them.
Yeah.
um, no matter the role, we're leading. No matter the role, we're taking something somewhere, and we need to influence the people around us to help it happen. Right? That's what everybody's doing. Even the staff accountant has to lead, and
Yeah.
so we have to be better leaders tomorrow than we are today if we're going to expect the growth to happen. So I feel like I could jam with you on this stuff all day, and you've got some great wisdom and great perspective, but our time is up. So how do people get in touch? How do they buy your stuff? How do they find you or learn from you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, our website is fringeheals.com, FRNGEHEALS.com. That's also our social handle. We do a bunch of stuff on social. I myself haven't been on any social platforms for years, but if anyone really wants to chat, I could talk about this all day, every day for the rest of my life without taking a breath. So my email address is Anthony, Anthony, at fringeheels.com. People can shoot me a note, go to the website, reach out to our rad customer service, anything. Yeah, I mean, we're here for the people. We're new. We're a small team, but I think we're doing pretty good. And we're trying to engage, right? Like I always was frustrated by the logo of a business being a barrier between its community and customers and the internal organization. And we're trying really hard and intentionally to not have that be the case. So please do reach out. We would love to chat. You got questions or just want to give feedback? That's what we're here for.
Thanks so much, Ant. That wraps up today's episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. If you gained as much value as I did from this call, please like, share, get it to other seven figure business owners so they too can benefit from the learning of each one of us. Uh, keep growing, keep striving, keep caring. Until next time.